Hello friends, welcome back to Strategic Management. And up till now, on one side we are trying to develop an understanding around the subject. We are trying to understand what strategy is at the core, how strategy is used, how strategy is conceived, how to look at strategy in within a shorter span of time, and also we have acknowledged that the actual character of strategy is associated with a long term perspective. We have tried to analyze this thing with a wider view given by several kinds of intelligent authors, contributors who have done so much as far as the field of strategy and strategic management goes. We have tried to build up an understanding of strategic management, which we will continue to do. In the meanwhile, we have tried to associate few terms which are deeply associated with strategy and strategic management. We have talked about planning, we have talked about thinking, we have talked about policy. And now we are going to build up our deeper understanding about how policy actually integrated itself into strategic management or evolved as strategic management. And again I would reiterate that we are parallelly taking two elements alongside. One is strategically managing things when you say dash, and then you can fill up at this stage, fill up organizations, even functions, let us say value chains at a later stage, and value webs at a later stage when I would be taking you towards that actually we strategically manage value webs. And parallelly we are taking management of strategy alongside with us to build up an understanding of several kinds of terms which are associated with strategy. So here we go, let us see what is the importance of strategic management and how should we be looking at strategic management with further perspective added to, and especially this is a very important contribution by Hayden and Schendel. It was written by them in 1972, business policy or strategic management. It's a wonderful paper. I definitely wish for you to look into this in details. And this paper talks about how business policy actually is associated with being strategic management. It has given important views given by so many thinkers, and one very important thing it has given to us, or it adds as a value to our information and knowledge and understanding, is that it talks about strategy being associated with several kinds of important functional areas: economics, operations management, management in general, marketing, and so on. And then we realize that strategy has a larger span and it actually is elemental. It strengthens the functional areas when we look at the functional areas with a strategic perspective backdrop. And I would tell you that somehow this has been the reason, the core reason and central reason for strategy being added systematically to different kinds of management functions and discipline, not only in implementation on the ground. Let us say marketing organizations or marketing functions, they have added strategic perspective to what they do. They have added they have started designing their marketing programs with strategic orientation, or you should say strategically. And on the other side, academia has also started incorporating that learning which academia has gained from such kind of organizations in text and in classroom discussions as well, in syllabi as well. Now you would have heard that people would say that we are talking about strategic human resource management, strategic HRM. These kind of subjects are there. You would say strategic marketing. There are several textbooks talking about strategic marketing. There are strategic operations management is also there. Strategic financial management is heard somewhere, and that probably is added course as a course in several kinds of areas, in several kinds of programs. So, you see strategic and this. So, because that learning is coming from industry, and that is where we are looking at every function with a strategic orientation. Let us see wherein a relationship between business policy and strategic management comes up, and what this paper talks about. So, Hayden and Schendel say that business policy is generally thought of as a course, not a field, and they wrote that in 1972, but it is quite valid till now. When I served about how things are going all around us, then the validity of his argument still stands, probably in probably scantily in different kinds of institutions or different kinds of organizations or different kinds of courses being run at different levels, but it stands valid as of now. So, they say that business policy is generally thought of as a course, not a field of study or broader discipline, and that such thinking, and perhaps even the name business policy, is a limitation to its development. So, they say that it is associated with a policy thought, policy associated thought, policy framework, and we have talked about that, human resource policy, or let us say pricing policy, policy as a framework. Then they further say that a broader view of the field business policy is needed, and we call that broader view strategic management. So, now you see this they added in 1972 that to take it further, business policy must be called as strategic management. Why? They argue on that. The basis of this wider view is to be found in the concept of strategy, and now here comes again, you see, this is that is why I kept it here in this segment, because now we have a precedence or a preceding discussion supports or give us an understanding about this argument which I am building here. And then now if you would realize that ultimately when you talk about several kinds of organizations, let us say public sector organizations, they had very strong policy structures, but then if you would look into that kind of a orientation which should have been built up with those within those organizations, or many of those, they built up that orientation of actually evolving themselves into a form wherein they started looking at their policy structures with strategic management orientation. Indian Oil probably did that long back, or oil and natural gas, ONGC, they probably did that, and they grew with a different kind of an orientation. For example, government supported banking systems, and State Bank of India probably they did that. Life Insurance Corporation, they started thinking that way. So, you see, they did broaden their perspective, even if probably in many cases you would not find that kind of a terminology being adapted, but definitely they broadened their perspective. So, you see, they somehow started looking at that situation with respect to the concept of strategy, wherein strategic thinking, long term perspective, and those kind of elements which we have already discussed, and definitional framework, analyzing resources, and several other things which we have already talked about, that encompasses concept of strategy. So, then this paper says that Chandler in 1962 was one of the first to apply the term strategy to policy questions, while one of the most comprehensive conceptual developments was Ansoff's corporate strategy in 1965, in which the problem solving model first developed and was applied to the problem of formulating strategy. So, here there are several elements which which were evolving as far as taking up policy perspective towards strategic management perspective through an understanding of strategy, and where Chandler and Ansoff, they were thinking and they were proposing this. And when this line is important for us to understand, problem solving model first developed and was applied to the problem of formulating strategy. Strategic choices, how to look at developing a strategic framework to go ahead. You see, strategy is a pathway, and when I would be talking about vision, then I would be telling you how we look at vision to define this pathway. So, till that time we will just try and build up our understanding through putting up pieces around and then creating a structure. So when you are formulating that strategy, that is where we should be looking at it. That is what this paper talks about when Ansoff contributed here. Now further, Irwin talks about 1974 towards better strategic management in his book, and a very good contribution. Strategic management is concerned with determining the long term goals of an enterprise and deciding on the most appropriate course of action to achieve them. Policy talks about a framework. Well, in strategic management actually takes it further and keep on dwelling upon this thought. And again we are talking about two things: long term goals and most appropriate course of action, wherein it says most appropriate course of action to achieve them, that is to achieve long term goals, considering changing environmental conditions, resources available and risk attitudes. How much risk we wish to take, what kind of resources do we have at our disposal. We have heard all these terms before. We have heard these terms in relation to the definitions which authors have proposed in terms of strategy and strategic management as well. But again here Irwin talks about strategic management, and this is an evolution from policy framework. Again further, Schendel and Hayton talk about that strategic management is the process of determining and maintaining the relationship of organization towards environment expressed through the use of selected objectives and of attempting to achieve their desired state of relationship through resource allocation, which allow efficient and effective action program by the organization and its subparts. Similar kind of a thing, largely encompassing and talking about analyzing resources and long term perspective and managing strategy through that. So you see, policy framework talks about slight rule based kind of an understanding, and here it talks about continuous analysis of how best we can use as far as our structural framework goes. So that is where it is important as far as the whole structure goes, and then these one or two slides are very important for us to shape up our understanding in terms of the value of strategic management. But let's look at some characteristics of strategic management with the perspective of what authors said in 1972. Strategic management is concerned with environmental change. Britishers left India in 1947 and we started opening ourselves to self-sustenance, self-reliance. How to run the country was a major issue, and there were several questions, several aspects, several business organizations they had to grow. Government was thinking in terms of putting a public sector as far as the development of public sector goes, because employment had to be generated, several products had to be made, industry had to be developed, everything had to be done from the scratch basically. So you see, it is concerned with the environmental change, and then there was a global situation which was going on, its anticipation and adaptation to it. So how we were adapting to that kind of change which was governing, developing new free India. All organizations including businesses must be related to their environment. Government or business organization, non-profit organizations, profit organizations, institutions like IITs. IIT was still there. IIT has been here for 177 years, IIT Roorkee, and several other institutions. So related to their environment. Means of integrating the subparts of the organizations through formal planning and control systems are of concern to strategic management. That is where the business policy perspective is suggested to evolve in the form of strategic management by these authors. And here it is quite self-explanatory. If you look at let us say banking system, banking organizations at the time of independence, you just go to their website, look into their history, analyze what they were doing, you would understand what I am trying to say. Try to look into organizations which were there, which were they were working at that time. Some banks were there, Indian Railways was there, and several other organizations were there. Several factories and plants were there. Several corporate organizations were working in a different kind of a form, they were there, and what were they thinking, how they were collating with the environmental changes, how they were looking into government policy structures which were guiding them, and how they were augmenting their policy structures. That means how they were strategically managing things as well as managing their strategies. Then the paper says the determination of basic organizational purpose is an essential task of strategic management. Determination of basic organizational purpose, and I would add to this that while determining the purpose, while we should determine the basic purpose of the organization, we should actually focus upon that purpose, and strategic management actually guides us towards that, and strategy leads us towards that. Yeah, this complements the argument, complements both the points complement each other. So, determination of basic organizational purpose is an essential task of strategic management, as in the determination of objectives for organizational subparts. What should be the functional objectives and how those should be collaborated and collated with each other as far as the whole scenario goes. Now, to elaborate the point, operations management, that is the efficient performance of the organizational subparts, is dependent upon sound strategy determination. Effective strategies are only partially determined by the subparts. External forces play a key role as well. Hence, effective strategic management must be outward looking. The point here is that, for example, operations management, and when to put up a newer technology infusion, when to go for higher scaled up production, why should we be going for that? India being a labor intensive economy, we wanted to go for automation, we wanted to enhance the production capacities, we wanted to become an export oriented economy, and we had to develop our brands as well, Indian brands. Everything had to be collated when we are thinking in terms of these kind of points, wherein the efficient performance of the organizational subparts is dependent upon sound strategy determination, where we would be leading our brands basically. I remember several kinds of Indian organizations, they started becoming a global point of discussion, wherein Hero Motors, they became very large in terms of their production capacity. Hero Cycles, they have always been one of the largest in production of cycles. At one point of time, Videocon was producing very large number of color televisions. Then there are several kinds of other organizations. For example, Tata Consultancy Services is a very large contributor as far as the whole scenario goes, and I would have referred to these kind of things earlier as well. But again, the point is that, and yes, I talked about this when I mentioned Indian Railways is the largest, SBI is one of the largest, and so on. You see, the point here is that operational scale up, operational efficiency, and taking it towards a global perspective is what we are looking at here as far as emphasizing upon this point goes. Just try and think in terms of that, is a key necessity for top management. When we talk of strategy with operations management perspective, it has to be looked upon as far as how top management must looking at it. Efficiency of organizational subparts can become a substitute for an effective relationship between the organization and its environment. Which are the key areas, which are the key elements which we should be focusing upon? I remember this morning I was talking to one of my batches of Masters of Business Administration, wherein we were discussing when I think 1970s, 74 if I am not wrong, Mr. J.R.D. Tata initiated Air India, and he flew the first flight from Bombay to Karachi, and Air India, I think 72, it was 72, but Air India became one of the finest airlines in the world within few years of its launch. And that is what precisely we are referring to, when we are talking about that efficiency of an organizational subparts can become a substitute for an effective relationship between the organization and its environment. On one side, Air India became flag carrier for as far as Indian aviation goes. On the other side, you have your own airlines that actually demonstrates your connectivity, your upcoming economic thinking, and so many things. it contributes to your national brand development. As far nation branding was not heard of at that time, but today nations have started talking about nation branding and so on, and several other kinds of things are associated with such kind of examples. Then why is it important to study strategic management? And here we are referring to another reference by Nelson and Alkafji. So traditional business disciplines, accounting, economics, finance have been recognized for centuries, and the paper which I am referring to in terms of Hayton Schendel also talks about this very specific element of how strategies associated with economics, marketing, and I told you about that earlier. So traditional business disciplines, accounting, economics, finance have been recognized for centuries. Hammurabi's codification of law mentioned accounting practices. Sun Tzu recognized such management techniques as division of labor, specialization, and the benefits of sound planning. Confucius advocated competition through merit systems while bemoaning the inherent problems of bureaucracy and so on. And it is not always that there are problems in bureaucracy. If you will look at examples like Singapore, bureaucracy has done much efficiently as compared to many other economies. And in today's India, in contemporary India, if you will look at the management style of contemporary bureaucracy in India, it is highly efficient. It has grown, it has evolved into an entirely different system, and today you would find specifically eligible bureaucrats, technology oriented bureaucrats sitting on those particular kinds of chairs wherein they lead the show with high effectiveness. Even at the government level, you would find highly qualified ministers specifically related to their field of expertise leading that field of expertise. For example, electronics and communication, Indian Railways and so on, you would find specific people leading the specific functions of their expertise as of now. So it is not always that that this is true, but definitely it has been seen by many authors with that kind of a perspective. So in India, Kautilya 332 BC wrote extensively about public administration techniques and necessity of job descriptions and so on. Again, the same reference and the same element of why is it important to study strategic management. The subject matter of strategic management is relatively new compared to traditional business topics. Strategic management and business policy integrates the traditional three subjects with the main purpose of providing a practical real world view of business management. The study of strategic management integrate all prior learning into one subject suited for application in the modern business environment. The message is very clear that art of strategy is supported by policy, plan, thinking, and because it has to evolve, you see, we are visualizing how we want this world to be, how we want our market to be, how we want to serve our customers in a very long term span in association with our resources. Now, when we are looking at that kind of a wider picture, you have to have an evolving perspective, because you do not understand, do not know what kind of situations and exigencies might come your way. And that is why this evolving perspective is a larger support as far as the whole situation goes. Otherwise, how organizations would survive or would grow, I would not say survive, would grow for let us say 150 years. We have talked about Tatas, we have talked about Indian Railways, we have talked about SBIs. Again, you have so many examples to reiterate, and that is the perspective. And the lifespan of an organization is the testimony of their evolving perspective. The study of strategic management integrates all prior learning into one subject suited for application in the modern business environment. Again, dwelling upon the fact, strategic management is designed to develop an awareness of the processes by which organizations can achieve synergies of the whole through the effective cooperation interaction of many departments within the organizations. Here we are touching upon the functional integration within an organization, which we would be dwelling upon when we would be talking about business level strategies later on, which is very important. As of now, just remember this, that this perspective is very important for us to understand. For example, and I'll just quote an example. For example, you want to develop a change in your product line, I have talked about this aspect in several of my subjects earlier as well, integrated marketing, communication, product and brand management, and a latest subject which I have recorded is on innovation in marketing and marketing of innovation. There I have demonstrated, and I wish to reiterate that point, that fundamentally if you want to create a product line change, you have to think about production line as well, and this is precisely we talk about when we are talking about integration and interaction and cooperation of several departments within the organization. Now, how does strategic management contributes to entrepreneurship? I would be dwelling upon this thought along with several other thoughts associated with the role of strategic management through and through, with a perspective of different functions, with a perspective of industry and so on. And I would be coming back to the reference by a reference of Hayden and Chendel, when I would be elaborating upon that, this is how strategic management takes a chord from marketing, economics and sociology and several other kinds of subjects to emphasize upon the fact that ultimately we have to think about what we are discussing with an evolving thought process. I will be catching up back with you in my next segment, continuing from here itself, strategic management's contribution to entrepreneurship. Till then, goodbye.